Through song we pray, through dance we think of our loved ones. We wish for good health and happiness. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya. May we live in peace and harmony. Hey yo, hey ya, hey yo. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, hey ya.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is another discussion for the We Can Do This Indian country about the state of the COVID-19 pandemic in Indian country. This is brought to you by We Can Do This Indian country, a campaign from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and partners, like the Indian Health Service. I'm Robert Pilot from Native Roots Radio, and we're helping amplify the discussion today along with G&G Advertising, a subcontractor on this We Can Do This campaign targeting Native Americans in the lower 48 and Alaska. For more information about COVID, go to wecandothis.hhs.gov or vaccines.gov. Thanks again for joining us. We've had a number of these Facebook Live town hall discussions in the last year or so, hosted by David Conoyer. Many of us are tired, and many of us have maybe moved on to other priorities in life, but the pandemic is still with us.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Emma Needham, and I also work with Robert Pilot on Native Roots Radio. I have some facts here about what's happening with the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control currently recommend a booster shot for everyone who is eligible. Boosters are available if you're age 6 months or older, and especially for those age 50 and up with chronic health conditions. COVID-19 is proven especially lethal for our vulnerable elders. So make sure you've gotten your vaccine and to get your booster. The COVID-19 pandemic continues even as we are looking at a downward slide in cases. With health challenges facing Indian country, COVID-19 has been and still is a potential danger. Now, here's a sample of the advertising messages created for Indigenous communities as part of the We Can Do This Indian Country campaign.
Honor our past, be influenced by those who came before us, and rise to make a difference. It's easier than ever before to be a modern day warrior. Let's get vaccinated so we can get back to making history. We can do this.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yes, that video features Superman, who's a pretty well-known Native American musician and artist. And he was kind enough to lend his voice to the We Can Do This campaign to help us protect our relatives. Vaccines right now are available for children ages 6 months and older, which is new. This just happened in earlier this summer in 2022. Right now, more than 14 million children under the age of 18 in the United States have gotten COVID-19. In 2022, kids under 5 have also proven more likely than older kids to be hospitalized for COVID-19. Fortunately, children ages 6 months through 4 years can now get the protection of a COVID vaccine. We can't predict how COVID will affect kids if they get it. They might be one of the lucky ones and just have the sniffles, but the risk for something worse is very real. For more information about COVID-19 vaccinations or COVID-19 at all, you can go to wecandothis.hhs.gov or vaccines.gov. Right now, I want to go to an interview that I was able to do with one of our youth. She was one of the lucky ones who did not have a hard case of COVID-19, but she was kind enough to share her experience with her family on COVID-19.
And welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me about COVID-19. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Ojolashko Guzik, and I am part of Red Lake Nation.
Wonderful. And thank you so much again for agreeing to do this with us. I'd like to ask you as a young person, how has COVID been for you? What has been the hardest part of the last few years having COVID around?
My baby sister and my mom got COVID about a month ago, and I was really worried about them because I didn't know if they were going to get better. But because my mom was vaccinated, it helped my sister, and they got better.
What happened when they got sick?
They had to stay in quarantine, and they were feeling really mucky, and they kind of slept and watched TV all day.
And have you had COVID yet?
Yes, I have. I had it a couple of weeks ago, actually, and I didn't get that sick because I was vaccinated, and I was only sick for like a day, and even then it was only stuffy nose and a cough.
Wow, that's really good. You're really lucky. Are you worried about going back to school with COVID still around?
No, not really, because I have been vaccinated, and a lot of my friends at school have been vaccinated, and we still mask a lot of the time, and we wash our hands a lot, so I'm not that worried, no.
Are you going to get a booster shot before school starts?
Yes, I am.
Are you nervous about getting the booster shot?
I don't like shots, but I know it's going to help my family if I do get the booster shot. So when I do get the booster shot, I know it's going to help my family. So I'm going to do it.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
It was scary when my stepdad and my mom and my sister got COVID. But we all had COVID at different times, except for my mom and my sister. And that was the hardest part. So I'm really glad that we're able to have a vaccine available to us so we can be protected from COVID-19.
Well, thank you so much again for joining us and for telling us how you're feeling about everything. I hope you have a great start to the year at school, and maybe we'll see you on another show. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Wow, that was an awesome video. I want to remind everyone, this is brought to you by We Can Do This Indian Country, a campaign from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and partners like the Indian Health Services. Again, I'm Robert Pilot of Native Roots Radio, and we're helping amplify the discussion today. I think a couple of important things that I'd like to bring up real quick is that about children. Children have been hospitalized from COVID. And sometimes, even the children who have not been hospitalized still have symptoms that can last for months and months. And that's why it's important that we're talking about this. The best way to protect your child is with a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine, and the vaccine that has been, tested with children their age. And we know that that's super duper important. Parents and caregivers get their vaccine, 6 months through 5 years of age, vaccinated with Moderna and Pfizer biotech vaccines. And I don't know, Ogma, can you help me with that again? What is exactly what we need? We need Moderna for our young ones, and
Yes, so Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech vaccines have been approved for children ages 6 months through 5 years. These vaccines for children have undergone some of the most intensive safety monitoring in U.S. history. Clinical trials for the vaccines for children ages 6 months to 11 years were designed to look at safety and to find the best dose. These vaccines are able to protect our children without causing serious safety concerns. You can find more information about COVID-19 at wecandothis.hhs.gov, or you can find a place to get your children vaccinated by going to vaccines.gov.
Well, we got a few people that we've talked to. Who should we go to next, Ogama?
I really enjoyed the conversation that we had with Jace Burr, who's from the MHA Nation in North Dakota, and he talked about the importance of getting a vaccine for his young one.
Yeah, so let's let's take a listen to our conversation that we recorded earlier with Jace. Remember, we can do this Indian style. Hey, we're here with Jace Burr. And Jace, what can you tell us what nation you're with? And I shouldn't say with, but a member of. I want to say thank you for coming on and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am an enrollee of the MHA Nation out of North Dakota. I work for the MHA recovery team that is housed in my tribe's treatment facility that's in Bismarck, North Dakota. But I get to work from home.
That can be a stressful job, I imagine. Jeez.
It's pretty busy, but yeah, no, it's pretty good though.
That's awesome. Hey, I know you have a small child now, baby. It's almost 6 months. Do you plan to get her vaccinated?
I do. When she's of appropriate age, yes, that's the plan, is to have her taken care of.
And do you have any fear or anything like that going into this, or is it pretty cut and dry with you and what the experts are saying?
I'd say it's pretty cut and dry. Like, I think if I have any concern, it's like the general concern of any vaccine that maybe you have to put your children through. But it's nothing that's like, I'm not paranoid about it. I think it's just being aware of what it is and what it does. It's probably, to me, is what is important, but I would like to get her protected.
Yeah, it must have been scary there for a while when we didn't have a vaccine for the little ones.
It was, because a lot of uncertainty, because you have to be more careful about where you're going, who you're talking to, and whatnot. And there's just kind of leaves you feeling vulnerable because you can't protect your little ones at that time.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too, because I know you have an experience with COVID, and so that even really accentuates more of maybe your fear for your baby. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with COVID?
Yeah, I contracted COVID in November of 2021, and I still have symptoms. So it's been 8 months basically since I got the virus, and my life hasn't really gone back to what it was. And I had a mild case of it. Like, it wasn't like, it wasn't what some people were experiencing. For me, it was like a common cold, but I lost my sense of taste and smell, and that still hasn't come back 100%. There are smells and tastes that can only call as being unrecognizable now. Like, so certain foods that I loved are don't taste how they used to, and I've kind of lost. I've lost the appeal for it. But that's just a mild case. Like, I'm very fortunate that it was just, for me, was a cold, but even being as limited as it was, it still has an effect on my life right now.
Wow, that's like a subtle effect too. I know it's like a dull feeling if you're not 100%. So that must weigh on your mental health too.
You have to adjust. You have to kind of get used to it. But like for example, I would want to restate that my case was mild, and I'm very grateful for that I'm here right now. But like some foods, like bananas, I love bananas, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand bananas now.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just completely changed. And but for the most part, things are well. But I know that there are people out there who have had more severe cases, and their lives have been changed, indefinitely. And I think getting vaccinated, it's a preventative measure to help other people as well. Like, you might not get sick to that degree, but there are others that could.
Right, and that's been kind of the thing we've been talking about a lot here is that specifically. So I want to bring you back, and it's I don't think of this a lot, but I want to bring you back pre-vaccine. How frightening that was, and you had a baby on the way, and just for everyone not having a vaccine and to where we are now. I mean, I remember people coming home from work in the medical field taking their clothes off at the door and being sick and not having any way to get better. And so being vaccinated has just become so important.
Well, it almost seems surreal, like in the very beginning, like when it kicked off. Here on the news, like there's a novel virus that's kind of made its way into our communities, and you almost can't even register that. It's like when people say it's surreal, like I think they're referring to, like, it feels like a movie. Like you only see this in media, you only see this in you know comic books and video games, like that could never happen in real life, and it is happening. And so I think the adjustment period was kind of a shock. Obviously, it was a shock for a lot of folks, but realize how quickly things change overnight. And so I don't know. I think for a lot of people, they're out of sight and out of mind. But for those of us who, I mean, that it was important to, we took it very seriously.
Right. Yeah, let's get back to a little bit about how you've been coping with your symptoms of long COVID, because that to me, boy, I like bananas in my cereal, and just hearing that and the possibilities. And I know you kind of been minimizing it, but that's a big deal, and it must weigh hard on your psyche too, just not liking bananas again.
There are, again, like it's not just bananas, right? Like there are certain foods and even smells that, like, that at one point were nostalgic for, old experiences that you really can't get anymore because they don't, it's unrecognizable. And it's sad. It can be depressing at times that things aren't how they used to be, and they're probably not going to go back to a way that was familiar.
Wow, that's interesting because I know you're a musician too, and I know smells trigger songs and songs trigger smells for me. Uh, how has that been for you? Because I know you're a musician, and it's like music brings you back to places with smells and things like that, and now we're not smelling the same way or the same things.
Well, that's funny you said, because I mean, I'm primarily a metal musician, so the areas where we're playing at, jamming at, tend to be, this deep, dark den of, of stink, I guess you want to say. So I don't miss that so much. But there was a point where when I first got COVID, that I can only describe it to you as olfactory blindness. Like there was nothing. It's almost like I never had it in the first place. And so the smells that I like, or that are to me are nostalgic, is like smell of rain, you know, um, the smell of spring. Like each season has its own feeling, right? And when you can't catch those anymore, it kind of scares you a little bit because you don't really know how to cope with it, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess too, you just have to hope that it comes back eventually. I don't know what have you heard, and how has it gotten any better?
I've talked to people that have had it before, and some people's experiences were really mild. Like they had it, lost it, and came back within a couple of weeks, and it was no issue. I have a friend that her and her boyfriend got it, and for her it came back in about 2 weeks, and for him it was another 4 weeks. And then I've had people who have said, I still don't have it back, like
Wow.
at all, and that's really scary. But as far as coping with it, I saw somewhere like people have talked about like eating oranges with certain meals to kind of like help help retrain your brain. So like, but like there are certain foods that are so off-putting now I just don't touch them anymore. And coffee was right on the cusp of that. I love coffee, and coffee now just smells bad. Um, Something that else smells bad that I wasn't ready for was gasoline. Like gasoline stinks anyways, but it's such a weird. It's not just the smell, but it's also the sensation. Like I was having phantom sensations or smells for like for weeks afterwards, where I would just get this immediate burst of this putrid stink from no source, and that was, it was just it was a really bizarre experience that I'm still dealing with.
Wow, that is bizarre. How has your life changed since COVID began? We talked a little bit about that, but give us a little deep dive on that. There's so much going on. I remember there were no cars driving in the neighborhood for us. Gasoline went down to zero amount of barrel, and all these outside things happened. But what happened? How did your life change?
I think the effects for us living in Brainerd weren't too immediate, because like in the area we live out here, like things hit us a little later than the bigger cities. But I think the first thing for me that I noted that I was like, or that made me aware that we were in this, was I saw the first people wearing masks outside, and I'm like, oh, really? They're doing that? And then I was like, yeah, they're doing it. Like, it's really happening. Like, this is something that's gonna, for now, this is the status quo. And then that after that follow came with work. Like, I was out of work for 2 weeks because we couldn't bring anyone. We couldn't all of my work is face to face. I was a counselor at the time, and so I had to, I can't work if I can't talk to people. And so that changed there. So work had to readjust. Everything went to Zoom, and started working from home for a little bit. And then like mandates happening, as far as like you have to wear a mask inside, and like all of that stuff too, like made it really scary. I think everyone's notion is like, oh, this is zombie apocalypse. It's like, well, no, but this is still very serious. Like, there was a movie that I watched. It was called Contagion, and like what's
Yeah.
funny, about that is, as soon as the pandemic broke out, that movie like went from like a regular movie towards the ratings went up and views went up on like Netflix and whatnot and other streaming services. Like, people were, what's sad, because people take to media or movies and fiction a lot quicker than they'll take to actual data and and real facts. But I guess for some folks that's how they digest things. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, it was I think it was the the mandates, and the stores were started making changes and whatnot, and stores are closing, or curfew too. Curfew was a really weird thing,
Yeah.
where my employer at the time, because at the time I was working for the Black Spanish Ojibwe, and they gave me this letter stating like that I'm an essential worker, that if I were to get pulled over by the cops or the military, that I have a letter stating that I'm supposed to be at a certain area, and that if I'm driving, that's where I'm going. And that, like, there were several things that were kind of like, oh my gosh, but that was one of them, where like I need a letter to state that I'm out legally to go to work. And it just, again, it kind of blows your mind, like this is only seen in stories and movies, and yet this is really happening in real life.
Wow.
But even now, I guess the pandemic, I guess you could say, is kind of, I've heard some people say that it's over, and some are saying that it's it's fizzling down. These changes are long lasting.
Well, one of the things too, I know you have a stepdaughter. How did that affect your life? Because during COVID, I don't know if she got COVID, if Anna got COVID, but uh, I know just your schedule and working around her schedule and in school must have been just unbelievable game changer for your family.
Everybody in the family unit, luckily, we're all able to kind of catch COVID late, but so far everyone's had it. But it's been, we didn't get it in the beginning. We got it after we were vaccinated, actually. But I know it's prevention. So, but when it first came about, like, you would take a child who's been face to face schooling all her life, and then immediately throw her in homeschooling and expect her to do well, was kind of an atrocity. I understand it had to happen, but it was, there was no preparing for that. And then, you know, my partner at the time, child's mom, has to go from working at, in face to working at home. So we're all cramped in this little apartment together, trying to figure things out. And it's just trial by fire. Like, you kind of take one day at a time, but there was no preparing for it. I when the pandemic broke out, I was finishing up my 4 year at SCSU, and I went from that last semester. I went from being in face to the last 2 months were all completely online. There was no graduation ceremony. There was no talking to friends. None of that. It was a weird, dismal experience. because those things got taken away. And like I'll say it too, like a lot of that could have been prevented early on.
Right. Right, definitely. Do you have any last thoughts before we let you go? I think it's really insight to revisit that, and also not only the past but the future because of your young daughter now, and protecting her.
I think it's important to think about everyone involved. You know, if you've got family, friends who might be at risk of, you know, of a disease or a virus that could be prevented by you wearing a mask or washing your hands or, you know, just getting a vaccine. Like I think that needs to be taken into account because there's a good chance, a really good chance that if you get vaccinated, you're gonna be fine. You know, you're gonna be okay. And those people do exist who do have adverse reactions to, you know, to some vaccines, but usually it's for a different reason. So I don't know. I would ask people to be more mindful about everybody. You know.
Well, Jace, thank you so much for stopping in and giving your perspective about your small one, the past, um, and your family unit, and how you're dealing with it, COVID past, present, and future. I really appreciate you stopping in.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. It's been nice.
Wow, it was really great talking to Jace. I'm so happy that he was able to spend some time with us to get that insight, Emma. It's always important to hear about our little ones and how they are dealing with this. And I think it's important too to think about not that long ago we didn't have any vaccines, and the children, the young ones, were in second place when it came to getting them vaccinated. So we've really come a long way.
Yes, yes, we have. And as a parent myself, I find it very relieving to know that my children can be vaccinated against COVID-19. Vaccines for children 6 months to 5 years and vaccines and boosters for children 5 to 11 are actually given in smaller doses. So they're given in smaller doses that are tailored just for them. And right now, the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, they recommend that children, including children who have already had COVID, get a COVID vaccine and get COVID booster shots. For
Wow.
more, yes, yep.
Yeah. Sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. I just wanted to let everybody know that for more information about COVID, again, you can go to wecandothis.hhs.gov. There's going to be lots of great information there on how these vaccines work and how they protect you and your children. Or you can go to vaccines.gov if you're looking for a place to go to locate a vaccine near you. In many parts of Indian country, the pandemic and its precautions haven't stopped. Robert, you were able to go down to the Gathering of Nations powwow in late April, and they were still taking precautions there. Is that right?
Right, and it was outdoors too, but there was still many precautions. And also, I remember flying with a mask on, and that's not happening now. And we know there's different variants of COVID out there now, and I do see people, older people, and younger people wearing masks again.
Yes, exactly. And it's, just like in the beginnings of the pandemic with Indian country, it has been our tribal communities that have been leading with COVID-19. And as cases are starting to rise and we're seeing more variants, we're seeing our tribal government still leading us. And many places have continued with either work from home or other COVID precautions, including masking and temperature checks before you enter tribal nations.
It was devastating, and can be devastating again if we're not careful and we're not vaccinated. Ogama, Emma, there's things. We've lost so many elders this past 2 years, and language speakers, and we can't afford to have that happen. And I think people in Indian country are taking heed to this very important lesson that we've learned. I remember Amber Torres's tribe when this first started. Her nation, she closed the borders,
Yes,
and
yep, that's the Walker River Paiute tribe, right?
exactly. And then there were other places that couldn't because their main road was on or the way into their nations was on a main road. So there was a lot of buckling down back then. And what we talked about a little bit earlier is that a lot of us have moved on with priorities, and but the pandemic is still here.
Right. And the easiest way to be able to safely move on with the priorities that you need in your life is to take these simple precautions like masking when you're in a large group and making sure to get your COVID-19 vaccine and your boosters so that you don't get gravely ill yourself and you don't affect our elders and our young people, and help to educate our relatives is really important as well too. I just want to let everybody know too that many Indian Health Service or IHS locations can provide vaccinations for COVID-19. You do need to check with your local clinics or pharmacies for any brands and availability by age, but that's what's really awesome about this website, vaccines.gov. It will allow you to find the nearest location to you that can give a vaccine that you're looking for the age range.
Yeah, and I just got to remind everyone too, before we move on here to our next segment, that this is brought to you by the We Can Do This Indian Country, a campaign from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and partners like the Indian Health Service. It's been so important. It's been a great ride, Emma, that we've been a part of this series of town halls, and want to give a quick shout out to G&G and also David Knoyer. We have another a segment we'd want to like roll in. Can you set it up for us, Emma?
Yes, absolutely. So I was able to speak with Dr. Cumminghay, who is a doctor in the metro area in Minnesota. And she was able to answer some of my questions that I had about COVID-19 vaccination for our young ones and how to find a vaccine. Dr. Cumminghay, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right, I am April Cumminghay. I am a board certified family medicine physician. I'm currently practicing in the Twin Cities metro area, and I'm an enrolled member in the 3 affiliated tribes of North Dakota.
Great. And, as a parent of a young child, I know you know that I have a baby that's going to be about 5 months old. We're coming up on that 6 months. Vaccines just got approved for children 6 months and older. And I've got some questions about getting her vaccinated. Are you getting a lot of questions in your office from parents like me?
A ton. Yeah, it's pretty standard right now to have questions regarding, well, especially 5 months old with your 6-month-old vaccinations. Flu shots start around that time. We're coming up on the fall here. So, yeah, flu shots and COVID immunizations, we're getting lots of questions on now.
Right. So I have a few questions about getting her vaccinated. Are you able to answer some of those for me?
Will do my best.
Okay, so the first question I have is that my child's primary care office is very small, and they've communicated to me that they have not received the vaccine for this age range, and they don't really expect to receive it for quite a while.
Mhm.
Where is a safe establishment I could take my child for a COVID vaccination?
Yeah, so most clinics are taking any patient who is eligible, so at least being 6 months, and it has to be 6 months. It can't be 5 months and 30 days. It has to be 6 months or it's considered invalid. You don't necessarily need to be a patient at all these different clinics in order to get visits there. Other options besides clinics are going to be your local pharmacies. Your local health department is a great resource. There also is a website, it's called vaccines.gov. You can type in your zip code and it will give you any available area within whatever set radius you place on the different locations that you can get an immunization. And you want to make sure to double check with some of these places that they are going down to the 6-month age. Some of them are only going 5 and above. As well. So you just want to make sure that they are indeed covering down to 6 months.
Right, and that's, I think, exactly what's happening with my local, my daughter's pediatrician's office is they're like, we're pretty small. We're sticking with 5 and up for now, and we're not
Mhm,
expecting to get the 6 month and up dose yet. And
mhm.
that I guess kind of leads a little bit into my next question, which I had for my doctor, and they didn't necessarily have a great answer for me for this one. But my baby had COVID-19 already. Unfortunately, her first cold was COVID-19. There's a 90-day wait to get her vaccinated. Do I have to extend that, or what are the rules with that for an infant?
So there aren't really hard and fast rules. There's recommendations. And it depends on who you talk to, honestly. There's a lot of information out there. Currently, what they're saying is that delaying your vaccination by 3 months in some studies has shown a better and improved immune response. Others are saying that you should get it as soon as you have symptom resolution. And so personally, I would advocate for getting vaccination sooner rather than later. But if some people would prefer to wait the full 90 days, and really either way is okay right now.
Interesting. That's good to know too. So when it comes to vaccinations, I've been vaccinated, my partner's been vaccinated, my older child has been vaccinated, and we all experienced varying levels of side effects, as most people do. What are the side effects for infants? Do they vary much from adults or older children?
With infants, it's a little bit harder to tell if they're feeling pain or if they're having a headache. But common side effects for infants, if they're going to have them, are going to be similar to any other vaccination that they receive. Sometimes they might have a fever. It can be a high fever. Typically up to 102 or 103 is considered a normal response. The key thing is that they come down with Tylenol administration. So fever is a common one. They might just seem more fussy. Some babies will have a decreased appetite or decreased oral intake if you're breastfeeding. But really, they might also be more tired. So babies are going to show them a little bit differently, but some may not have any symptoms at all.
Interesting. And I would honestly say her and I had COVID at the same time.
Mhm.
I had been vaccinated, and she probably came through it a little bit easier than I did. I was feeling pretty rough. Um,
Mhm.
I had likely contracted COVID after traveling. I had to travel out of state for a family member who passed away. We had to go to their services, and I had asked for a second booster before I left the state, not realizing that they were only giving secondary boosters after 4 months to people who were over the age of 50. As of
Correct.
now, a full series of COVID-19 vaccinations, I believe, is considered 2 initial shots plus 1 booster for people under the age of 50. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. Even frontline workers are not under the age of 50 aren't being considered eligible to get that second booster. So it's really just those patients who are over 50 and have those specific high risk conditions as well. If you're under 50 and you meet those high risk criteria, you can, but there's only a handful that qualify. For infants ages 6 months to 4 years, it's also going to be a 3-series set. You'll do your first immunization. You'll get the second one 21 days after the first administration. And then the third one for the complete series is going to be, let me see here. I want to say that it is 8 weeks after the second dose. If your child is 5 years or older, 5 years to 17, they do only need the 2-dose series. And it's going to be a second shot 21 days after the first one.
Great. And then as we come into more COVID and another cold and flu season with COVID at our doorsteps, are we expecting that have you heard anything? Are we expecting kind of collectively as society now that we're going to have additional vaccinations or boosters that are going to possibly be available as this goes on?
Yeah, there's talk about coming out with a new vaccine That's more directed to the Omicron variant. The vaccination that we have currently is targeted at the Alpha variant. And so you may note that there's people out there who are getting vaccinations and then they are still getting infections. The good news is that they're typically less severe. And right now the goal is to decrease hospitalizations. Hopefully we could decrease subsequent infections. But right now, it's sort of just talk. We don't have a timeline yet on when new immunizations are coming out. It's very quick. We're seeing science happen in real time. And so we get very little advance warning for when we're going to have these immunizations available. But I would anticipate them coming in the future here.
You know, I recently got the opportunity to listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci talking about the new vaccines that are available for infants, and he mentioned that they are among the most studied vaccines for children. How is it possible that they're coming out so quickly but are yet the most studied? I know we're watching science in real time, but what would you say to a parent who had that question for you?
Well, I would say that a lot of the basics for vaccines are not new per se. We have had mRNA vaccines for several years. And then also we are having the entire world collectively working on these vaccines. So they're not skipping any steps in the scientific process or in verification, certification, anything like that. They are following all these steps. And so we've got, number one, a large group of people who are working together to get these immunizations tested safely and ready for the public. And then again, they're not new technology. Some of the newer vaccines that are coming out, and I'm spacing on the name right now. I'll have to look at it. It's like Novavax or something like that, Noravax. But it's the new one, and it uses not the mRNA that we use currently for the Pfizer and for the Moderna vaccines, but it goes back to using the proteins that are done in typical vaccines. And so we have a lot of the base of these vaccines studied, and then we're just building on it in real time.
So, Dr. Cummingham, I want to thank you again for doing this interview with me. And I just do have one final question, and it's a little bit open-ended, but what advice would you give to somebody who is wanting to talk to their friends or family about getting vaccinated?
I would approach this kind of in an encouraging way, not in a judgmental way. Encourage the patient that we're trying to do this for a global health perspective, that we're doing this to decrease our own personal risk of illness and injury. Native Americans are at an increased risk for severe illness and complications. And especially, unfortunately, there's a lot of other conditions such as diabetes that do run rampant in our Native American populations, which puts people at even further risk. So I would just say, to try to talk to your loved ones from a perspective of wanting to be helpful, wanting to protect our elders, our people who may not be able to get their immunizations by themselves, little ones like your own little baby there. We're trying to protect a community.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cummingham, for answering my questions and for joining us this evening. I really cannot thank you enough for your time and your insight into all of this. And I wish you the best and good health.
Thank you so much. Thanks again for having me. Have a good night.
Wow, Emma, that was an awesome segment. Geez, a lot of great insight today.
Yes, it's been really great to have these conversations with relatives in Indian country and talk about these important things. I think that there's not enough people in Indian country that are having these conversations with each other.
Exactly. And, I want to thank everyone for joining us in another discussion of We Can Do This Indian Country about the state of COVID-19 pandemic, in Indian country. This discussion was brought to you by We Can Do This Indian Country, a campaign from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and partners like the Indian Health Service. I'm Robert Pilot from Neighborhoods Radio, and we've been amplifying, and I've been here with Emma Needham too, and we've been amplifying this discussion today along with G&G Advertising, a subcontractor on the We Can Do This campaign, working on targeting Native Americans in the lower 48 and Alaska. How can we get more information, Emma?
The best way to get the most up-to-date information on COVID-19 and vaccinations is by going to wecandothis.hhs.gov, or if you're looking for information on where to locate a vaccination, you can go to vaccines.gov. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
And thank you, Emma, for joining me. And thank you out there, everybody, for listening. Stay safe. See you soon.
Through song we pray, through dance we think of our loved ones.